Philadelphia Eagles safety Sidney Brown did not have the positive offseason that other young prospects did. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Thursday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. You can find us Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well, 5 days a week, even during the dog days of the offseason. Nothing going on right now. We know the Eagles saved the tush push yesterday. That was the big headline. Now, we've got pretty much nothing for a couple months until training camp does get underway. So we're going to continue our player profile series today, and we're going to stick with the theme of young defensive prospects heading into either year 2 or year 3. Role players that potentially could have much bigger roles in 2025, potentially starters. We're asking the question, can these guys take that step to high quality play, potentially even stardom? Talking about players like Moro Ujoma and Jalix Hunt and Keely Ringo. Today, we are locked on Philadelphia Eagles third-year safety Sidney Brown, who, unlike a lot of these other prospects, did not have the positive offseason that makes it look like the Eagles really believe in his ceiling, his upside as a long-term starter. And after the moves they did make this year, this offseason, we are asking the question, is Sidney Brown a long-term backup? And it's not like Sidney Brown was some first-round pick that they traded up for. It's not like he was even a second-rounder. This was a third-round selection, and while you want a third-round pick normally to pan out to be at least a starter or a rotational piece, not every third-round pick is going to play. Not every third-round pick is going to end up being a star. When it comes to who Sidney Brown's going to become, it's still very much up in the air. But when you look at a lot of these younger players that we've highlighted, like Moro Ujoma, like Jalix Hunt, like Keely Ringo, if you look at last year, Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, there was an underlying theme with how the Eagles were going about the development process of most of their top 3-round picks that they invested a lot in. Like a third-round pick is not nothing. And of course, we know how important first and second rounders are to the success of an NFL team. The common theme with all these prospects, the last 2 off seasons, I would say, is that Howie Roseman has created a clear path for all of these players to start. While he's not going all in on these players where he's putting every egg in that one basket, he's bringing in other veteran options, some other plan Bs, but these young players, regardless of their experience or lack of tape, maybe just more of a projection kind of player, regardless of that fact, Howie Roseman has made those guys the plan A, and he's not creating roadblocks for those young players like he has in years past. The coaches are also in on that plan. Nick Sirianni is not doing what Doug Peterson used to do with young players, which I feel like a lot of the times was just bury them behind veterans and not let them grow on the football field. The minute there was a sign of growing pains, Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz, it just felt like they would pull those guys, where Nick Sirianni and Vic Fangio, that's not the case. And so when you look at Moro Ujoma, the Eagles did not create roadblocks for him to step up in place of Milton Williams. They did not add a guy that's so obviously going to start ahead of Jalix Hunt. You can say the same thing for Keely Ringo. Like, yeah, they brought in Azeez Ojulari, and they brought in Adoree Jackson, and they drafted Ty Robinson in the 4th round. These are options to potentially start to have big roles on offense or defense. But the plan A are these young players heading into year 2 or year 3. The only young player, really, that the Eagles have invested a top 3-round pick in that didn't get that clear path created for him this offseason, that didn't really have that positive, little bit of added confidence from his team, was Sidney Brown. Even on the offensive side of the ball, Tyler Steen, who I feel like is the one top 3-round pick of the last few years, the Eagles just they don't want him to be the guy. They're hoping for other options. Even this offseason, though, they didn't bring in another Mekhi Becton. They didn't draft a guard in the first 3 rounds. Like, they traded for Kenyon Green and they drafted a bunch of offensive linemen on day 3. But Tyler Steen right now, it even feels like he is plan A at right guard, and he was also a 3rd-round pick the same year as Sidney Brown. Sidney Brown, he didn't get that path created. His opportunity of all these young players, I think, took the biggest hit once the Eagles drafted Andrew Mukuba with that 2nd-round pick at number 64 overall. It felt like Sidney Brown was on that same trajectory as all these players I'm talking about. Once they traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Houston Texans, I was saying to myself, okay, there it is. There's the spot for Sidney Brown. Like, right now, obviously on the roster, he's going to be the starter next to Reed Blankenship. And I thought maybe they'll draft a guy in the 3rd round or later. Maybe they'll, sign Justin Simmons after the draft to compete with Sidney Brown. But it felt like they wanted Sid to play. And a lot of the reports about that trade, trying to make sense of that trade, a lot of the reports said they had a 3rd-round pick in Sidney Brown that hasn't got on the field a lot, and they wanted to see through that investment to see what he's got. That was not the case, because drafting Andrew Mukuba, that's no small investment. The Eagles have only drafted a safety in the first 2 rounds 2 other times since 2010. And the last time they did it, it was 2010 and 2011. They drafted Nate Allen in the 2nd round of 2010. They drafted Jaquan Jarrett in 2011. Neither pick worked. After that, they did not draft a safety in the first 2 rounds up until this year with Andrew Mukuba. So that's a significant investment that Howie Roseman made that he normally does not make. Mukuba was, I think, handpicked by Vic Fangio. A lot of similar traits to C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think Mukuba is exactly what Fangio is looking for in his zone-heavy defense. And so once that pick happened, despite what everybody's saying in my it mentions on Twitter and comments on YouTube when I've discussed the big role Mukuba's going to have this year, despite people saying that Sidney Brown's going to be able to compete and that I should stop just handing the job to a rookie, the fact of the matter is, unless Mukuba is just downright terrible this offseason, he's awful in training camp, or he just gets injured all of the time. And some people are concerned about his frame. They are concerned if he can hold up at the next level. But unless, again, he's just so injury prone like Sidney Jones that he can't get on the field, or he's so clearly a Jaquan Jarrett level bust from the start, I don't know what the path to starting is for Sidney Brown. It's not going to happen. I mean, we know that Reed Blankenship is also a staple piece of the secondary. So I feel like Blankenship and Mukuba, they're the guys. So Sidney Brown, definitely of all these young players, even over Tyler Steen, and I like Sidney Brown better in a vacuum as a prospect over Tyler Steen. But even Tyler Steen got a bigger note of confidence from the team this offseason based on the lack of investments, heavy investments in the right guard position. Like Kenyon Green was a former top 15 pick, but his tape has been terrible over the last few seasons with the Houston Texans. Tyler Steen is the clear favorite to start at right guard as of right now on May 22nd. Sidney Brown, I don't, the best case scenario now is that he is a dime linebacker, 3rd safety kind of player in a rotational role. Maybe the Eagles use that 3rd safety more this year, but that's not even a really big role because last year Vic Fangio barely ever used 3 safeties. Now maybe he will more this offseason or this regular season. He'll try to implement it this offseason, but I doubt it. So Sidney Brown, I kind of feel bad for him because in his defense, he was injured. He wasn't really at 100% until the end of last year, recovering from that leg injury. So he barely played. And while, he's not in a good spot to start right now, I feel like that's more situational and it's based on projecting who he's going to become. I don't feel like he's played nearly enough to put a label on this guy that he's already clearly a draft bust, that he can't be a high-level starter in the NFL. I don't think it's fair to say that about Sid. Again, he just has not been able to play much. And so I think he could be a good player, but the fact of the matter is, whether it's fair or not to Sid, the situation at hand pretty much blocks him from starting this year, at least in my opinion. Vic Fangio is an old school coach. If Sid is just a better player than Mukuba, maybe he starts. But I think the Eagles drafting a second-round safety is no small thing, and they obviously want Andrew Mukuba to start in 2025. So Sidney Brown is not going to be a starter this year, but I will say I do still believe he can be a starter in the NFL, and I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you're out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in just one place. Their Post Your Job feature allows you to write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, welcome back into this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. We are locked on Sidney Brown, the Eagles' third-year safety, as we continue our player profile series this week. Talked about Moro Ijoma on Monday, Jalix Hunt on Tuesday, Keely Ringo on Wednesday, and now we're talking about Sidney Brown. Tomorrow it's going to be about Tyler Steen, and again, a lot of these young players, the Eagles have cleared the way for these guys to start. They are the plan A moving forward as these players replace a lot of former starters like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, and for Keely Ringo, replacing Darius Slay. So these guys have big roles in 2025. Unfortunately for Sidney Brown, we thought he was getting that path cleared as well when they traded away C.J. Gardner-Johnson. But the Andrew Mukuba draft pick tells me best case scenario this year for Brown, he's going to be a third safety that maybe plays in dime packages. But the problem is for Brown and his, prospect of playing time is that the Eagles don't really run three safety sets a whole lot in this Fangio defense. Maybe that'll be different in the beginning of the season because Nakobe Dean is injured. Jahad Campbell is also, recovering from his shoulder injury. He's going to play both, linebacker and edge. We'll see how far along Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is. Maybe they do elect in the first half of the season to play more dime, do more DB-heavy looks on defense. I would like to see that. But the fact of the matter is, the path kind of got blocked for Sidney Brown during the NFL draft. And that's unfortunate because I will say, although it was clear based on the Mukuba pick and the fact that Tristan McCullum was playing over Brown a lot last year when they did use three safeties. And he kind of, I clearly don't think that Sidney Brown is a big time, Vic Fangio type of safety. But I also don't think it's fair to say, oh, he's a bust. He's another Kevon Wallace or a Jaquan Jarrett type of safety that just didn't work for the Eagles. Another classic raw third-round pick like a Davion Taylor that it didn't work out for Howie Roseman. I don't think it's fair to say that yet. Is it a fact that Fangio probably doesn't love Sidney Brown and the idea of starting him long-term? Absolutely, or else you don't draft a safety in the second round. But again, as I was saying at the end of segment 1, he just has not played nearly enough football at the NFL level to say one way or the other, this is who this kid is. Again, I do think he's a high-variance player that is a little out of control. He needs a lot of developing as a tackler, one-on-one in coverage, discipline when it comes to zone coverage, his spatial awareness. I do think he makes a lot of mistakes because of how fast and aggressive he does play. So I do think he has a ways to go in the development, perspective. But at the same time, a lot of those things that he needs to work on are also kind of his strengths. His greatest gifts are also kind of his greatest curses. So yeah, he needs to rein it in a little bit, so to speak, to really fully develop as a starting potential safety at the NFL level. I also do love, though, that he has those abilities, the speed, the range, the physicality, the hit power, the aggressive mentality where every play, it's like this guy wants to take the ball carrier's head off. I kind of love that mentality of Sid. So, Yeah, he needs to learn to use it better. He needs to learn to control his powers more, if you will. But I like that he has those abilities in the first place. I think for a modern day safety to have success in the NFL, you have to have range. You got to be able to cover sideline to sideline. Like the deep ball, that's what safeties are for right now. It's all about, in this new cover two world, it's all about stopping the deep ball. So you want to have speed and range at safety. And a lot of these safeties are pseudo linebackers that have to be big time role players against the run. And Sidney Brown, again, he misses tackles a lot because he comes in so fast, takes the wrong angle, tries to hit you with his head basically in his shoulders, trying to take out your legs. He needs to wrap up better and come in with more control. But he loves to hit. He's a very willing tackler, and that's not always the case. And that's a bugaboo a lot of the times for young DB. So I think that's a positive trait, though, as well, that Brown is very willing to get dirty. He wants to tackle the ball carrier. That's not always a thing for DBs. So, again, he can get too out of control, but I think the traits are there for Sidney Brown to be a high-quality, potential star player at this position. He has a low floor, but I also think he has a very high ceiling. And I do think if they decide to use more three safety looks, I think he could be the perfect kind of third safety in dime packages. Like as a single high safety, he has that speed and range to cover sideline to sideline. If you want to use him in the box, again, he has the hip power, the willingness to tackle against the run. I just think what you have to do with him while he develops is keep his role simple. Like, don't overload his plate where his mental clock is just going like crazy. I think that's a big thing. Like, if he's going to be a role player this year, use those gifts. Just say, hey, your role, it's to just get downhill and attack the ball carrier. You're the single high safety, stop the deep ball. Like, that is your role. If he's going to have to be like the quarterback of the defense, the Reed Blankenship of the secondary, that's where I don't think his upside is. And that's where I think Fangio kind of loses trust in him. Is Fangio is all about processing. It's the mental side of the game as well. It's playing with discipline, physical discipline and mental discipline. And Sid doesn't have that right now. So if he develops that part of his game, I think he will eventually be a starter in the NFL, even if it's not in Philadelphia. For now, you got to at least use, like, he's too talented of a player with that speed and that hit ability to not be on the football field. So even if he doesn't fully develop in that way and he still kind of runs like a chicken with his head cut off in the secondary, I still want to find ways to get him on the field as a blitzer, again, when you use single high safeties or in obvious passing situations when you think the deep ball's coming. He is a very explosive player. So I do want him out there. Worst case scenario, I think he's just going to be a damn good special teams gunner. And I think he was already that last year. I mean, that one forced fumble he had, I believe it was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he just destroyed the punt returner. It felt like he was going 100 miles an hour downfield. Worst case, you can at least use that speed, that range, that hit ability to be a special teams ace. Again, it's a gift and a curse, his aggressiveness. Like, I love the mentality. I loved last year against the Dallas Cowboys when he got into that fight during that one punt play. Like, that was so awesome. And I think you got to kind of have that dog mentality. That's why we all loved CJ Gardner-Johnson so much. He's just got to learn to rein it in, to play with more discipline. The game has to slow down for him mentally. It's kind of like what I was talking about with Keely Ringo yesterday. I think once the mental game, once that slows down for him and he learns to use his physical abilities better, that's when you're going to see the really big strides in his game develop. Will he be on the field enough, though, to develop like that? That's the big question. And now that Andrew Mukuba is in-house, it's going to be more difficult. But still, a very fascinating player to keep an eye on this summer is Sidney Brown at safety, a big year 3 for the former Illinois product. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we will wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. I was thinking about this yesterday after the Eagles saved the tush push, embarrassed Roger Goodell, embarrassed the Green Bay Packers, and all 22 teams that voted against this play to ban it from the NFL. It looks like the Eagles are becoming the villain of the NFL, and I am here for it. I'm going to tell you why they're becoming the enemy of the league. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, guys, we're wrapping up this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. So yesterday, the Eagles, they saved the tush push. 2 years in a row, the league has tried to get rid of this play. It has not worked. They needed 24 votes to get it done. Only got 22 votes, 22-10. Ironically, that was the same score as the 22-10 playoff win over the Green Bay Packers. The Packers couldn't get the job done. Neither could Roger Goodell. And it's funny because I think, like Eagles fans, we are all celebrating this. Like, it was a big win. It felt like a witch hunt where it was us against the world. It really, and that's where Philadelphia really comes together. And I think they love that kind of mentality. I think they love that kind of situation. So I think we were all thriving yesterday in that environment. And it makes today so much more enjoyable that everybody was trying to stop this team from doing this. And the Eagles still get to do it in 2025. Like that was massive. But when you notice that, how everybody was kind of against Philadelphia, it is kind of foreshadowing that the Eagles have slowly become one of the villains of the NFL. You know the old saying, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain? Yesterday made me kind of think that's who the Eagles are becoming. The Eagles, if you think about it, for a long time, it depends on who you ask. I mean, don't ask any NFC East fans in Washington, Dallas, or New York, but for a while, the Eagles were the hero. Up until even last year, I think the Eagles were one of the heroes of the league. They were the underdogs in 2017 that had never won a Super Bowl. They took down the Empire. They beat Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, with a backup quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I mean, who was not voting, or I should say rooting, for Philadelphia in Super Bowl 52? Nobody was rooting for New England outside of people in Boston. This year, they stopped the Kansas City Chiefs from the three-peat. I mean, outside of Kansas City now, I think everybody has Chiefs fatigue. So the Eagles have always kind of been the heroes, or at least the underdogs. It's not like everybody was rooting against Philadelphia like they do the Patriots or the Chiefs, or even to a degree still, even though they've done nothing since the 90s. We all still root against the Dallas Cowboys, unless you live in Dallas. I think the Eagles are becoming one of those teams, but it's for a good reason. They've been so good now for so long that I think people are getting Eagles fatigue. I think people were getting tush push fatigue. Not just owners across the league and Roger Goodell, but I do think a lot of fans outside of Philadelphia also wanted to see this play get removed, right? When you look at it, since 2000 and I would say 2016, since Howie Roseman took back over as the general manager after the Chip Kelly era, outside of Philadelphia, who have been the most consistent teams in football? I mean, the only teams ahead of the Eagles from a success standpoint, I would say, are the Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. And can you even say the Patriots? The Eagles have 2 Super Bowls in that span. The Patriots have 1. So that era ended in 2019. It's really been the Eagles and the Chiefs. It's kind of like the NFL's equivalent of the Warriors and the Cavaliers. And now the Rams have had a lot of consistent success. So have the Buffalo Bills, the San Francisco 49ers as well. But the Eagles have been one of the most consistent teams of this decade. They've won 2 championships. They've been to 3. I think they're becoming a villain of the league. And now they have this play that they've pretty much perfected. And a lot of teams, a lot of fans believe it's quote-unquote ruining the sport. And the Eagles are flexing on everybody, and they keep using it. They keep having success with it. And the league can't get rid of it. Like, they keep getting away with this every single year. So I think people are getting annoyed with Philadelphia. I think they are becoming a villain. And another reason for this is they have a quarterback in Jalen Hurts that now, after the Super Bowl 59 win, you can't really deny he's a star anymore. You couldn't say that Saquon Barkley won them that championship. The Kansas City Chiefs shut down Saquon Barkley and dared Jalen Hurts to beat them with his arm inside the pocket. He did just that. He picked them apart inside the pocket for 4 quarters. So they have a quarterback that's also been pretty divisive, that not everybody loves as a franchise quarterback, and now you can't deny he's a star anymore. But people hate the way that Jalen Hurts is a star at quarterback compared to a Josh Allen, a Pat Mahomes, a Lamar Jackson, heck, even a Justin Herbert or a Jaden Daniels. Those guys, everybody wants these other quarterbacks so badly to be better than Jalen Hurts. I think everybody tries to even rank a Dak Prescott ahead of him or a Matt Stafford. But Jalen now, after this past year, undeniably, in my opinion, is a top 5 quarterback. And I don't think Jalen Hurts is like this beloved NFL star regardless of team. Like, I think who doesn't really love Lamar Jackson? You know what I mean? Like across the country, unless you're, I guess you could say like, I don't know. I mean, the Steelers, unless you're a fan of the AFC North, even if you're a Bills or Chiefs fan, Lamar hasn't beat Mahomes or Allen enough to hate him. Who doesn't love Lamar Jackson? Or, I mean, Josh Allen is not a hateable player at all. Pat Mahomes is, but like even Joe Burrow. I mean, nobody hates Joe Burrow. Nobody hates Matt Stafford or these other stars. But Jalen Hurts, I don't know. I don't feel the unanimous love for Jalen that you do these other stars. I don't think non-Eagles fans, NFL fans, are just running to the TV to watch Jalen Hurts. And also, if you look at just the way they won football games that last year, it wasn't very aesthetically pleasing. They ran the football a lot to win a championship. They're the villains of the NFL now. That's just the fact of the matter. When you become not a dynasty, I don't want to use that word yet, but a consistent championship winning team, a consistent Super Bowl contender, eventually, it really is that age-old saying, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And the Eagles are living as a contender long enough to see themselves become the villain. And the tush push, I think, was that final thing that really pushed them to the edge, going from Anakin to Darth Vader. Like, the Eagles are now Darth Vader. It's like for Marvel fans. RDJ was Iron Man. Everybody loved Iron Man. Now he's becoming Doctor Doom. Now he's the new Thanos of the MCU. That's the Philadelphia Eagles, but I am absolutely here for it. I love it. It's new territory. The Eagles have never been in this spot before, and I think we're all reveling in it. Because, again, Philadelphia loves to be, they love it being them against the world. Like, Philadelphia doesn't want people rooting for them, right? And so I think this is exactly, the Eagles are becoming exactly who this fan base wants them to be. And the tush push, again, that was the thing that pushed it over the edge. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is our Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.